You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. We're just a few months away from the World Cup's kickoff. The United States is one of the host countries, along with Mexico and Canada. Host cities like Seattle are getting ready to welcome players, coaches, officials, families, and fans from around the world. At least the ones who are still comfortable traveling to the United States, which has taken a number of steps many see as unwelcoming to outside visitors. Travel bans, visa restrictions, and expanded immigration arrests have left some people wondering if traveling to the United States right now is worth it, even to see their countries compete in the beautiful game. Albert Samaha is a journalist who wrote a piece in The New Yorker about how World Cup players are navigating Trump's immigration crackdown. And he joins me now. Albert, thanks very much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I touched on this already, but to be clear, which new U.S. policies are overlapping with this World Cup? So for players, coaches, and fans, what kinds of moves by the Trump administration are they being affected by?
So the most direct policy impact on anyone participating in the World Cup is the specific presidential proclamation that targets 40 different countries, banning basically all sorts of visas, both immigrant and non-immigrant visas. So 5 countries that have qualified for the World Cup are on that list: Iran, Haiti, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, and most recently, Democratic Republic of Congo, which just qualified last week. No one from those countries can come to the U.S. through a tourist visa. So obviously that applies to fans, but it could also potentially apply to the family members, loved ones, friends of the soccer players themselves. A lot of them are currently facing this uncertainty of who they'll be able to bring. I spoke to the State Department. While they have exceptions specifically for immediate relatives of players involved, they said that that covers spouses, parents, children, and after that, it's case by case. And case by case is kind of the buzzword here because all of this is discretionary. Who the U.S. lets into its borders with a tourist visa from anywhere in the world is discretionary. And for these 5 countries in particular, very narrow opportunities for anyone to make it in.
Let's just put this into context because historically we've had Olympics and World Cups in places and under a cloud of, situations in the world during wars, some pretty tense political times in our history. What's unique about this moment?
I did a ton of research. There's been obviously a lot written on the geopolitical tensions behind World Cups and Olympics, as you mentioned, and not once could I find an example of a host nation for one of these events effectively banning en masse the entire populations of people from participating countries. That is quite unprecedented. And in fact, when FIFA was considering who should host the 2026 World Cup about a decade ago, 9 years ago to be exact, Trump was already president on his first term. And this was around the time there was controversy over his travel ban on predominantly Muslim countries. That was all hovering while while FIFA was considering the U.S. and already Gianni Infantino, the president of FIFA, was discussing that those policies might disqualify the U.S. from being a contender to get that World Cup. Because if you don't allow in people to your country, how can you host an event that's so global? Yet FIFA awarded the World Cup to the U.S. even before the Supreme Court had ruled on those policies. And now, 9 years later, Trump's travel ban is even more widespread, even more intense. And there seems to be nothing that FIFA has done about it or could do about it as it's kind of coming around the corner. And Trump is back in office 9 years later for this second term. And FIFA sort of in this position where they are backing Trump. They have sort of developed this partnership with Trump.
They gave him a peace prize.
They gave him the first ever FIFA Peace Prize. Went to the inauguration. He's had meetings with Trump at the White House. He's assured everybody that the world is welcome, but Trump's policies have explicitly said that not everyone in the world is welcome.
Let's talk specifically about one country, Haiti, which you covered quite closely. Obviously, they are part of this group of countries that's under a travel ban. How did you end up connecting with people connected with the Haiti club, and what did you hear from them?
I reached out to players from many teams, dozens of teams, particularly focused on the ones tied to this travel ban. And I was most curious about Haiti because This year is their first time qualifying for the World Cup in 52 years. So there are people in Haiti that have waited their whole lives for this moment. And, in this tragic irony of all the years for them to qualify, it had to be in a country in a year where their people are not welcome into its borders. So I was particularly curious how a lot of those players were feeling, especially because Haiti's team is comprised of a lot of players from the Haitian diaspora who grew up in the US, Belgium, France, Canada, all over the world. And so they sort of have this interesting perspective of a lot of them have spent time in the US, have seen kind of the impact of these immigration policies. And they take this kind of unifying pride of representing this ancestral homeland that their parents, their grandparents had told them about, and really this pride in presenting Haitian culture, their flag, their anthem, to the world at this event, the world's greatest competition. And a lot of them are sort of facing this ambivalence of the joy of this pinnacle moment in their young careers right around the corner with this anxiety and uncertainty of not being sure who they'll be able to bring once they get here. Will it be safe for people of Haitian descent when the Trump administration has really specifically targeted Haiti, even since his first administration, with not just racist policies, but racist insults. The temporary protected status that covers hundreds of thousands of Haitian immigrants in the U.S. now, the Trump administration has moved to push. And with how we've seen ICE detaining people just based off of appearance. Will it be safe for people who look like they might be Haitian in a country that is trying to detain and deport Haitians? These questions are on the minds and in the group chats of the players I spoke with as they try to balance preparing for this massive moment with figuring out how their relatives are going to fare coming to the U.S.
Yeah, like you said, it's not just about getting to the United States. It's also once you're here, what happens. Have you heard of people specifically deciding, either family members, maybe extended personnel with the clubs, even players or coaches saying like they're not going to come because of this?
Yes, I spoke to one player who grew up in Haiti. His parents are there, his family members are there. And he said he has a close group of friends. He's this player named Lucius Dietzen. He lived in Haiti until he was 12, 13 years old. His parents sent him to the US to study and to have more upward mobility opportunities. And every day since he's been in the US, he kept in touch with those friends. He would call them after and before all of his games. They would send him these motivational videos. They were really a core part of his life, and they can't get visas. So he sort of already accepted the fact that they'll probably have to just watch those games in Haiti. But I will say that most players I spoke with, they're still maintaining this optimism. I do think that, I mentioned in the story that nearly everyone I spoke to in my reporting is either applying for a visa themselves or for loved ones. And so I think people were careful not to be too opinionated in speaking about these U.S. policies because they know that, as particularly with this administration, but just generally with visa applications over the course of time, this is a discretionary process, and they don't want to put a target on their backs. So players I spoke with maintain this sense of optimism, but are also preparing for the fact that it might be possible that very few of their relatives will be able to come.
And I mean, the first whistle's on June 11th. So, like, we are approaching go time. And to get travel arrangements, to make sure you get tickets, things like that. I mean, there's a limited window here, right? Like, are some people expecting they're going to hear just last minute and have to scramble?
Yes, I spoke with federation officials from Ghana, who they've been in the World Cup many times. They're a veteran football association that has gone through this process, and they describe this as one of the most cumbersome visa application processes in recent memory for them. They began the visa application process in October, right after Ghana officially qualified for the World Cup, because they knew it would be a long process. And the way it works for the World Cup, for folks that don't follow this closely, is the players themselves don't know whether they're going to be on the final World Cup roster until late May. So Ghana, and I'm sure other countries as well, they went to these players and they said, hey, we don't know if you're going to be on the roster officially yet, but give us a list of all the family members you might want to bring, just so that we can give this list to the U.S. Embassy in Accra and start moving the ball forward in terms of getting these applications in, because it does take a long time, and it is sort of just up to how quickly U.S. Customs officials can move on it. And these officials, these players, they're not going to know when they're going to find out the yeses and the nos. It's all going to be last minute. It's all moving pretty slow, and then it's going to move fast, and they're going to have to figure out last minute, as you said, how they're going to do this.
This is coming when these players and coaches are preparing for some of the most important games of their lives. I mean, are they having difficulty sort of focusing on their training regimens with all of this swirling? It's just a very unusual situation.
Not a single player I spoke to would say that or admit that. I think the players themselves, they're saying, we're letting the Federation deal with that. We're giving the names to the Federation officials. They're going to handle this. The Federation officials, the agents I spoke with, they've been very mindful about saying, we're going to take this off the players' plates. They just have to worry about performing and preparing for what's going to happen on the pitch, while kind of the people around them are going to handle all this. But they're human too, and it's hard for me to imagine it's not on their mind. Players on Haiti's team were telling me that this is something that they talk to each other about in their group chats, in the locker room, asking each other questions like, "Who are you going to bring? What's that application process like? Have you heard anything?" So I know they're thinking about it. I know they're talking about it. But these guys are professional athletes. They're used to focusing even amid tensions, around them. They express that they're locked in, but human sentiment is impossible to ignore, and you got to think it's got to be in the back of their minds in a way that it might not be for players from more privileged countries that don't have to worry about these visa issues.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, Haiti hasn't qualified in more than half a century. And so to not be able to have your family and friends or even fans come has got to be weighing on your mind. We just have to expect that. Obviously, people need to be careful about what they say publicly. You reported in your piece that FIFA rules do prohibit discrimination of any kind against a country, an individual, or a group of people. How is that not applicable here, Albert? I guess is my question. I mean, FIFA has taken political stands in the past when, for example, Russia invaded Ukraine. Obviously, there is a war happening right now, with the U.S. and Israel bombing Iran. There's a ceasefire that just started. But is FIFA, did they consider doing any kind of sanctions against the United States because of these limits on immigration?
It's a great question. I wish FIFA responded to my multiple efforts to get that very question answered. They have not expressed any interest in any sanctions toward the U.S. It's been quite the opposite, where Infantino, the FIFA president, has embraced Trump. They have not made any efforts to sort of reconcile these stated policies with the reality on the ground. And it's quite ironic because, like I mentioned, in 2017, Infantino did acknowledge that U.S. immigration policies could get in the way of being eligible. And yet since then, there has been kind of no mention of it at all. They're just sort of living with the discomfort of this, while people are worried about ticket prices, while people are worried about, what stadiums are going to be able to welcome people in with public transportation systems. There's sort of a million different logistical issues FIFA is facing at the moment right now, and they really haven't answered for any of them. Their only sort of official statements have been, everything's going to be fine. This is going to be the greatest World Cup in the world. The U.S. is being a great host. And this is going to be the biggest World Cup with 48 countries instead of 32. They've expanded it for the, ironically, very reason of broadening accessibility of the World Cup and opportunities in the World Cup to countries from the global South that haven't had as many opportunities. So we're seeing this really uncomfortable and ironic intersection of the stated values of FIFA saying this is going to be the most inclusive World Cup ever, with more countries than ever, from Africa, from Asia, and yet at the same time, a lot of people from those countries are not welcome in the country that is hosting it.
Obviously, we've talked about the Haitian team and the players who are struggling with the travel ban in the United States. Another country under a travel ban that is a World Cup qualifier also has much bigger things on its mind, because we're talking about Iran, and this is a country that is under bombardment, and even survival right now is something that people there are having to deal with. So I'm sure talking about a sports tournament is a little bit of a different level of urgency. But, Iran is supposed to play in Seattle I actually have tickets to Iran versus Egypt in Seattle. There was a lot of questions, President Trump at one point saying it wouldn't be appropriate for the Iranian players to come. What did you hear when you tried to dig into what is happening with Iran's national team?
So I spoke to an agent, Aref Mohajeri, who represents several members of the national team, in addition to dozens more Iranian players that play in their domestic league. And, he said himself, in Iran, no one's thinking about soccer right now, but for the players themselves that could potentially be competing in the World Cup, this is a major opportunity for them to advance to the careers that they might not have otherwise. In past World Cups, there have been cases of players on Iran's team that have used that opportunity to springboard to get in international attention, sign with clubs in Europe and elsewhere around the world. A lot of Iranian domestic league games are not broadcast internationally, so for a lot of those players, this is kind of their biggest opportunity to sign those deals. And hearing a ref kind of describe the situation to me, it's like usually the stakes are about players signing with a team in Europe so that they could get a bigger paycheck and more professional opportunities. In this case, it could be the difference between staying in a country at war and escaping a war zone with a visa to play for a country elsewhere. Iran right now is the big question mark in the World Cup. Iran's sports ministry itself has said that it would be impossible for them to send players. The Iranian government itself had said that they're not going to send players to any country that is hostile to them. They recently canceled a national team trip to Saudi Arabia since the start of the U.S. and Israel war with Iran. So there's been a lot of talk on both sides, as there has been around the war generally. But FIFA still maintains that Iran will be there, and they will play their games in the U.S. according to FIFA. Iran requested FIFA move their games to Mexico. FIFA would not do that. So the way the World Cup works is every team gets at least three games, and then depending on how those three games go, you might move ahead in the tournament. All three of Iran's games are in the U.S. And if you want to be critical of FIFA, it wouldn't have been hard, you'd think, to at least, schedule those games maybe in Canada or Mexico, which are co-hosting the tournament. Same could be said for countries like Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, and Haiti that are subject to some of these travel bans. But that is not the case. FIFA has stood strong on this, and the stakes for Iran are quite high in a sports sense and also a financial sense because no one in the history of the World Cup has ever withdrawn from competition. Withdrawing from competition brings potential ramifications, big time fines that the country would have to pay, as well as potential suspensions from future competitions. So Iran's position is,
Even
well,
if
if you
they're
guys
under bombardment, like they're being they're having to deal with a war.
Yeah, so Iran's position is if we can't come, you have to ban us from coming, right? If FIFA bans them from coming, if the US excludes them from coming, then nothing Iran can do. They would just have to forfeit the competition. But if they withdraw themselves, they would be liable to face these long-term sanctions that could really impact their sports programs with FIFA moving forward. And that's something that they haven't wanted to confront so far. So it remains a question mark. The ball hasn't moved in either direction so far, and we're just going to keep having to watch and see what's going to happen with the Iran national team.
I mean, there's so many layers here, and obviously the geopolitical situation is naturally going to be intertwined with something, as massive as the World Cup. I just wonder if you can leave us with, Albert, kind of a sense of when you speak to these players and coaches, their feelings about participating and the importance of it, even amidst all of this.
For them, it's about representation. It's that by having Haiti in a tournament like this, by having Iran in a tournament like this, their presence on this global stage for millions watching on TV and in arenas, it's a reminder of these policies. Every time Haiti will take the pitch, every time Iran will take the pitch, maybe the commentators won't talk about it themselves, but it will be a story around those games, regardless of what happens on the scoreboard, on the pitch. Their mere presence reminds people of these American policies. And I think for a lot of people who, believe in the power of sports to both unite and also serve as sort of this prism this lens into socio-geopolitical issues for people that might not follow it otherwise, it's drawing attention to these issues. To me, that's sort of the power of the World Cup. It's not so much about uniting the world and these sort of idealistic visions of, kumbaya. For me, it's about drawing attention to the very, real problems that exist outside of sports. Every time that Haitian anthem plays, every time they turn to the crowd and people are waving Iranian flags or Haitian flags, or Senegal has a very popular renowned fan base who travels to every game. They play drums, they dance, they paint their body with the letters of Senegal. If they're not going to be there, people will notice it, people will talk about it, and it will draw even more attention to the injustice of these policies.
Albert Samaha is a journalist who wrote in The New Yorker about how World Cup players are navigating Trump's immigration crackdown. Players, fans, coaches, all kinds of people connected to this tournament. Really appreciate your time, Albert. This has been something that's, for the host cities, obviously looming very large here in Seattle. And there are, these political diaspora groups that will show up for, for example, Iran, for, other Haiti and everything like that. But part of the World Cup is, people coming from all over the world, right? And so this is such a critical issue to cover. I really appreciate all the work that you did to call attention to this.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate that.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime right here online at KUOW.org, or of course on your favorite podcast app.